Why everyone is talking about Fable again. After years of silence, rumors, and pure speculation, the return of Fable is no longer just a dream. A brand new entry is scheduled to arrive in 2026, and excitement is building across the gaming world. For many players, this is not just another RPG announcement, it is the revival of one of the most beloved fantasy franchises ever created. But to understand why people are so hyped today, we need to go back to where it all started, to a world called Albion, where every choice mattered, every action shaped your hero, and morality was not just a dialogue option, but a visible transformation. So before the next chapter begins, let's revisit the trilogy that made Fable legendary. Fable 2004, the RPG that made you feel important. When the original Fable launched, it promised something ambitious, a living world that reacted to who you became. You did not just play a hero, you created one. The story begins with tragedy. Your village is destroyed, your family is torn apart, and you are taken to the Heroes Guild to train. From that moment forward, the game constantly asks a simple question: what kind of person will you become? A noble protector, a feared tyrant, or something in between? This was where Fable truly stood out. Your morality was not hidden behind numbers. If you chose kindness, villagers smiled at you. If you embraced cruelty, your appearance changed. Horns could grow, your presence became intimidating, and people reacted accordingly. Few games at the time made morality feel so physical. Combat blended swords, bows, and magic in a way that was accessible but satisfying, allowing players to experiment with different playstyles without overwhelming complexity. But what really made Fable memorable was its tone. It never took itself too seriously. British humor ran through every village, every side quest, and every bizarre interaction. One moment you were saving towns, and the next you were entering absurd competitions or dealing with strange characters. It felt handcrafted, personal, alive. And while some early promises about dynamic systems were scaled back, the emotional connection players formed with Albion was undeniable. Fable was not just about saving the world, it was about growing up inside it. Fable II 2008, bigger, bolder, and more emotional. If the first game built the foundation, Fable 2 expanded it dramatically. Set hundreds of years later, the world had evolved. Civilization was advancing, society was changing, and the tone leaned slightly more mature while still keeping the series' signature charm. This time, the story was more personal. Your journey begins as a poor orphan, struggling simply to survive, but soon fate pushes you toward a much larger destiny tied to power, revenge, and sacrifice. One of the most brilliant additions was your dog, not just a companion, but an emotional anchor. The dog fought beside you, helped you find secrets, reacted to danger, and created a bond that players genuinely cared about. It was not a gimmick, it was a relationship. Fable 2 also deepened player freedom. You could buy property across towns, become a landlord, get married, start a family, and build a life beyond combat. For many players, Albion no longer felt like a stage. It felt like home, and then came one of the boldest narrative moments in RPG history, a scene that shocked players by removing control completely, proving that sometimes powerlessness can be the strongest storytelling tool. By the end, the game asked players to make a final choice between wealth, sacrifice, or love. There was no universally correct answer, only consequences. Fable 2 is often remembered as the emotional peak of the series because it balanced humor with surprisingly heavy themes about responsibility and Fable 3 2010, The Burden of the Crown. Most RPGs end when you defeat the villain. Fable 3 asked a different question: what happens after you win? The first half of the game follows a familiar structure. You rise against a tyrannical ruler, gather allies, and lead a revolution. But the true twist comes when you take the throne. Suddenly the hero becomes the ruler, and ruling is not easy. Every decision carries weight. Do you keep promises made during the rebellion, even if it risks the kingdom's survival? Do you impose harsh laws to prepare for an unseen threat, or do you try to please everyone and hope for the best? For the first time, Fable transformed morality into leadership. Good intentions were no longer enough. You needed strategy, sacrifice, sometimes even cold calculation. Mechanically, the game simplified some traditional RPG systems, which divided fans. However, its focus shifted toward accessibility and cinematic storytelling. Was it perfect? No. But it dared to explore something rare in games: the loneliness of power. And despite criticism, many players still admire its ambition. Why Fable still matters. So why does this franchise remain so important years later? Because Fable understood something many RPGs forget. Players do not just want freedom, they want their freedom to matter. Fable made your choices visible. Your character aged, your appearance changed, your relationships evolved, your kingdom lived with the consequences, and above all, the world reacted. Albion was never just background scenery. It responded to you. Few games captured that sense of personal legend so effectively. Enter Fable 2026, a new beginning. Now, after a long absence, Fable is returning, not as a simple sequel, but as a modern reimagining. Technology has evolved enormously since the original trilogy. Open worlds are richer, AI is smarter, and player expectations are higher than ever, which raises the biggest question: what will the new Fable focus on? If it succeeds, it will not be because of graphics alone. It will succeed if it remembers what made the series special in the first place: choice with consequence, humor with heart, freedom with identity. Players are not just hoping for nostalgia, they are hoping for evolution, a world that feels reactive again. A morality system that goes beyond simple good or evil, characters that stay with you long after the credits roll, and perhaps most importantly, a fantasy world that feels unpredictable. The challenge ahead, reviving a beloved franchise, is never easy. Expectations can be dangerous, fans want the magic they remember, but they also want something modern, too safe, and it feels outdated. Too different, and it loses its soul. The next Fable walks a very thin line between honoring the past and redefining the future. But if done right, it could mark the return of a type of RPG that focuses less on scale and more on personal storytelling. Why this moment matters. For longtime fans, this is more than just another release window. It is the return to a world where your story was truly your own. For newer players, it may become the first time they experience what made Fable unforgettable. And as we wait for 2026, one thing is clear. Few RPG franchises have left such a distinctive mark. The question now is not whether people are excited, it is whether the new Fable can live up to a legacy built on choice, consequence, and imagination. Albion is calling once again. The only question left is, what kind of hero will you be this time?